Hey y'all, here OS Reviews. Today we're taking a quick look at the Halvum M8 Plus. This is a relatively affordable 8-inch Android tablet selling for under $100, serving as an alternative to the Fire 8 tablets from Amazon, as well as the Lenovo tablets that are also hitting a similar price point. It's running on a nearly stock version of Android 12 and has a octa-core processor. It's the MediaTek 8183, which is also found on a lot of Chromebooks. So although it's not going to be the most powerful chip in the world in terms of being flagship tier, it should also be sufficient for light casual computing needs on a tablet of this price range. It comes with 4GB of RAM, 64GB of storage, which can be expanded via a micro SD card, with a 5100 mAh capacity battery that should get you upwards of 8 hours of usage before it needs to be topped up, and also has an 8 megapixel resolution camera on the rear. Now inside of the packaging we have of course just the tablet itself that we'll take a closer look at in a moment. Other quick contents include just a standard wall adapter that uses USB and a USB Type-C charging and sync cable. Taking a closer look at the design, it's a relatively standard build, but does have a soft touch rubber finish on the rear, which makes it feel at least a little bit more grippy compared to just plain plastic, for example. Feels quite decent, has a nice weight to it, and the camera also features a LED flash for illuminating itself in darker environments. The buttons here are made out of plastic, but do feel relatively tactile for volume as well as power. The very top also features a standard 3.5mm headphone jack, the aforementioned micro SD card slot for expanding the memory, as well as a USB Type-C charging port. There are stereo speakers, but they're all placed on the rear of the tablet, so you don't get quite as much of a boombox stereo separation if you're holding it in this landscape orientation. So that would have been a little bit more preferred, but it is what it is, and overall it does get sufficiently loud. Although on paper 8 inches may not seem like too big of a difference compared to larger 6-inch, 7-inch phones, because the aspect ratio on tablets here are still more conventional 16:9, so a bit more boxy compared to the 2:1 aspect ratio on phone displays being more narrow. You do end up with a larger surface area that is still rather significant if you are using them side by side. Turning things on, we are greeted to a very stock version of Android 12, which is nice to see. There's no bloatware at all, and everything is pretty much vanilla. Only the standard Google apps, including the Play Store, as well as YouTube and some utility functions, are pre-installed. Jumping into system settings here, you can see about 20GB of storage are taken up out of the box, leaving about 51GB free. First impressions on the display being that it is decent in terms of viewing angles. It's an IPS LCD screen, so regardless if you're looking at it from a side angle, it still looks relatively intact when it comes to colors, not washing out too much. With that being said, brightness levels I would say are only average, which is to say good enough for most indoor conditions and if there's a little bit of sunlight hitting on it, but it's definitely not as bright as say an OLED screen, so that would be unreasonable at this price range. What I will say though is that it is a 720p HD resolution and it's not technically fully laminated, so you will notice a slight gap between the glass and the screen underneath, which can cast a little bit more glare, and also it's not going to be quite as pin sharp as a full HD res, but pretty much par for the course I would say for a new tablet that is hitting this relatively entry-level price point. Otherwise, we can have access to the standard kind of Google News feed here on the side, and we do have access to full system gestures for navigation. Bezel sizes are also not the smallest in the world, but it still makes it easy enough to grip without accidentally touching the screen at the very least. One thing that's nice is you do have access to the standard Gboard, which is actually really spacious and easy to type on. There is an accelerometer, of course, which you can use to change the orientation, supporting swipe gestures as well. And cranking up the volume here, overall, I would say that the speakers aren't bad in terms of getting sufficiently loud, but again, doesn't have quite as much stereo separation if you do have it placed on the other side, although you can always opt for Bluetooth headphones, speakers, or even a pair of standard wired headphones since there is that 3.5mm aux jack at the very least. Playback doesn't seem to be too big of an issue. Videos even loading up to Full HD or even 2K seem to buffer relatively quickly and can be handled by the MediaTek 8183 without too much signs of delay or lag, which is good. Antenna reception quality also remained fair in my testing, supporting dual band 2.4G and 5G Wi-Fi, and was consistently getting almost full bars even when placed a little bit further away from the router. So that is one benefit of having a mostly plastic chassis when it comes to loading speeds again, not having to wait too long for the actual video to begin playing back. Everything still remains smooth enough, I would say, in daily usage. You will maybe find some occasional moments of stuttering and dropped animation since it doesn't have, say, a fast 90 Hz or 120 Hz refresh rate on the screen, but again, mostly expected, I would say, for a budget Android tablet. It mostly gets by, and you can run, I would say, around 4 to 5 different programs in the background, and things are still loading back decently. Anything more than that, though, you'll start to notice some refreshing and re-rendering going on whenever you hop back into those programs again. But overall, it's a decent enough experience when you're reading back web pages, for example. Again, content is relatively quick to load. Even on more complex web pages like The Verge here with plenty of ads and video elements, it really just takes a split second longer compared to flagship grade chips to completely render. Here's also a quick demo of how split screen multitasking functions, opening up 2 programs at once. For example, watching back a video while doing some web browsing or emailing on the other side, and you can also rescale the windows as well, taking just a split second for things to kind of refresh and then snap into focus and remaining responsive enough. The tablet does get slightly warm around the center region here on the back as you are holding it and pressing it a little harder, but never gets too hot. So thermal throttling was generally not too big of a problem. Everything else, though, is extremely stock to Android 12. Some of the improved accessibility, digital well-being options can be fully found, different dashboards for monitoring your usage of the device, as well as children's modes to limit certain applications can also be found, as well as DuraSpeed, which is found on most MediaTek chip-based products. When turned on, it will restrict background apps from eating up too much resources. You can think of it as almost like a gaming mode, so it will focus on all its horsepower on the game that you're running and prevent anything else from occupying CPU and GPU in the background. If anything, a slight area of weakness on a lot of these budget tablets and smartphones in general might be frequent OS level upgrades. The past 2 weeks, I've already received 2 system upgrades, which just improves the stability a little bit. But again, in terms of OS level upgrades, going from Android 12 to 13 or 14, that's an area of weakness, mostly on these lower cost tablets. Like most budget tablets, the camera performance is just so-so, but I would argue that it's never been a huge selling point on tablets as it is on smartphones. As long as it gets the job done for scanning and documents, we're kind of good to go, and that's certainly the case here. Text looks clear enough as you are snapping a quick image just to save that memory, or if you want to capture something in a quick emergency, it does the trick. If there is sufficient lighting around you, it actually looks decent. What you won't find will be any active stylus support. That is, there is no pressure sensitivity, so if you're an artist looking for drawing and doodling, do keep that in mind. As for doing just some simple gaming, I would say it's sufficient for a light kind of tap and go style titles. Anything that isn't super graphically demanding does still a reasonable job. If you're trying to go into more AAA territory with titles like PUBG, for example, or Asphalt, it's going to be more challenging since this processor at the end of the day is still relatively entry level, even though it's also found on Chromebooks. In general, my recommendation would be keeping it more light to things like puzzle type games. Arcade games will fare just a little bit better compared to really fast frame rate titles, although it will certainly still run, but you have to just wait a lot longer for those titles to open up and expect to have more drop frames in addition to really lowest settings if you are playing something like PUBG. Granted, again, there is no title from the Play Store that you aren't able to at least install, and that includes social media apps as well. The lightweight frame and soft touch finish does make it quite nice if you are reading back comics or webtoons, especially with that color screen. So here is just a quick example of that. Definitely fast enough as you are scrolling along for content like this. And again, with Android 12, there are some built-in modes, including a reading mode that will turn everything more of a muted black and white monochrome. So this can be useful if you're looking at PDFs, Word documents, or even some quick ebooks. Although for longer term reading, perhaps an e-ink screen will feel even more comfortable, but this is certainly a nice kind of quick mode that you can toggle on and off there at a click. So that is more or less it as far as our quick hands-on look at the Halvom M8 Plus. Again, a relatively entry-level Android tablet, and kind of represents what you can expect here in 2023 for a sub $100 new tablet. Positives include the fact that it's very compact. The soft touch finish makes it nice and grippy when you're holding it, as long as you aren't pressing it super hard and expect the fastest performance in the world. Again, serving as a decent alternative to the Kindle Fire tablets as well as the Lenovo tablets by providing an even more stock experience when it comes to the software at the very least. Though I will say that it doesn't come with any cellular capabilities. Still, this is not a shabby, basic Android tablet for what it is. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Halvom M8 Plus.